Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Speaking of Google, let's talk about the Google Visual Elements Gallery that showed up this week on the Google developer site, which was essentially, if you haven't seen it, there was a certain amount of coverage, so you may have seen it. It's an illustrated version of the SERP broken down into components and discussing the features. So text result, rich result, image result, video result, host group, site group. So site I'm blanking on these. Site links group is what I meant to say. Host group, attribution, so on and so forth. And it's kind of my sense of what it's trying to do is really just clarify what these elements are. People talk about them in a lot of different ways, and just illustrate what's going on with the SERP now. As David, you pointed out, there was no discussion of local or the knowledge graph. We didn't see that show up here, which is interesting. But the thing that I was struck by, and the thing that I wrote about in the newsletter, is just how complicated this page has become. How many elements relative to the early days of Google when it was much simpler. And there's, vertically dynamic aspects of it that you see in certain verticals and you don't see in others. Local being one of those, obviously. Products. That's not necessarily the intention to be totally comprehensive of this visual elements guide. But I was just struck by the enormous complexity. I called it Baroque, that the SERP has become. And there's a kind of fatigue in a way that I think exists among some people in just trying to parse and navigate through the SERP and sort of get to the information that you want to. And I don't think that this is some, this is necessarily Google's. This is an organic outcome of years and years and years of testing and evolution. So Google has gotten here organically, largely, but I think it's problematic for the future. Is my sense. Baroque or Baroquean was the pun that I used.
I would just give Google the benefit of the doubt on the user testing. I'm quite sure that they've done their research.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And seen the elements that consumers are engaging with, and this is probably, I don't know if you'd call it sort of the median choice or whatever, but it's like this is what most of the population prefers, I'm sure. There may be opportunities for users like yourself to personalize, okay, I don't want to see these kinds of results or whatever in the future, which Google could investigate. But I do think that this has got to be the outcome. I mean, as a culture, I think things have become more visual, right? The popularity of Instagram and TikTok and Pinterest and all these things, like I think users do want to see a lot of these more visual elements. I know, especially when I'm doing a product search, I think the images are super helpful to understand, is this a sort of knockoff or high design type of thing in a lot of cases. So I don't know that images are.
Well, I'm not all trying to argue
searches, but yeah.
I'm not trying to argue against images. I mean, I think I absolutely once sort of mobile took over as the primary UI UX. I think the SERP became much more visual, and then we've talked in the past about the competition from these visual social media and how they're conditioning people to expect images and to respond to images, and that was a little bit of the discussion with the demographic reviews conversation. I just think that kind of holistically. There's just it's like the Main Street electrical parade, it's just overloaded with stuff.
Yeah, I think there maybe could be more visual connection between the elements of the SERP, right? If you have a carousel of product images, showing up somewhere, why isn't there a carousel of web results or whatever? Like there are probably opportunities to make it feel more consistent, but I just think that this is a natural outgrowth of
I agree
kinds
with
of
you.
Results consumers prefer. So
I agree that this is an organic evolution of the SERP, but I find it. I mean, I think it's overloaded. But go ahead, Mike.
So I was just going to say, in terms of this overload or new visual features, last week I think it was somebody from Whitespark noticed that on Google Maps, if a listing has a video, it's moved to image position number 2 and auto plays. So as you're scanning the listings in Maps, videos are auto playing there, which is really, I mean, both striking and distracting at the same time, but indicates Google's that some of what Google does isn't necessarily around user testing, but around competitive issues, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a product. You know, I use Google every single day. I mean, I know intuitively how to navigate it. I'm not stumped by it. You know, I scroll past the ads, I find what I want. You know, I click on images, I expand carousels, I do all of that. Google has trained us all to interact with the SERP, but I think that I have my intuitive sense, and this goes back to the Google versus TikTok versus ChatGPT or whatever kind of emerges. I think that there's uh, um, just a density about it, which creates
Mm-hmm.
a kind of fatigue. I mean, I think one of the things that younger users are responding to with something like TikTok, and I don't want to overemphasize that, is that there's just an immediacy about it, right? When you see a tour of a restaurant, and Crystal Tang posted a testimonial from a restaurant that had a third party do a video of this restaurant. It was in London, and they got like 200 calls in 24 hours based on this single video. There's a kind of immediacy there. It's like I hear the person directly talking about their experience, whatever that is, and I get some, if it's appropriate, some sort of visual feedback about the environment, and that just cuts through layers and layers and layers of research that people have to do on Google in this sort of conventional way. Now, TikTok is a flawed product. It's imperfect. There's bias, there's ads, there's all kinds of things. But in those instances where you're getting direct information, it's much faster and more immediate than what you can
So
get
I
from Google.
disagree with. I think it's a personal preference. I hate watching videos. I will do everything I can to not watch a video and play it at 3x speed. I think it's a total waste of time. So,
It depends on what the use case is, I think.
I would say unless I'm trying to figure out how to do something manually, I'm never going to watch a video.
I'm in David's camp. I mean, I get these videos in my family channel, and it's like, oh God, another video. I
Mm-hmm.
don't watch them either. But I think that may be demographically
It is.
developed habits.
I recognize that most of the population prefers the TikTok model, but I
And
would just,
David being
I
old,
wouldn't say
David
that.
being old before his
thank
time,
you.
sort of.
I'm in that
more,
30 to 6. I'm in that 30 to 60 demographic.
I
So,
wouldn't say most of the population. I think it depends very much on the use case. You know,
yeah.
sometimes I get sent videos. I have a friend that sends me videos all the time, reels on Facebook and Instagram. I don't like them. I don't watch them. You know, I tell them don't send me these. But but
I can't tell my children not to send them. They send them.
well, I think that different kinds of media, different kinds of experiences have utility in different situations. I mean, if you're there's a lot of travel video on TikTok that is useful. Like here's a tour of
No,
Siena, Italy, or
I want
whatever.
to see that in a series of image thumbnails that I can click into the ones that look interesting and not have to sit through the whole thing to figure out which
Well,
things
there's
are
30
interesting.
seconds or a minute or something.
That's too
But
long. I can make
yeah.
these decisions in 3 seconds, not 30.
Well, I mean, what's interesting, what I think Google is doing that is interesting, sort of to go back to the review issue, is I think Google is doing a mix of things. They are responding to user testing, they are responding to competition, and they're also doing what they think is useful to people, sort of independent of those external considerations. And so we're here with Google SERP in my mind is like the 1950s Cadillac or something, the early 1960s. It's like
With the
with just
fins.
too many fins and adornments. I mean, remember that the
And the
AH,
hood. Don't forget the hood ornament.
yes, the hood ornament, the
Yes.
the AHF's search site, which
Yes.
was
Yep.
which was Yep, and we sort of said, oh, look at how refreshingly clean the
Right.
UI is. If no
Or
one
was it
is,
Hey? I can't even remember now.
it's Yep,
It's
I think.
Hey was
Yeah.
from Basecamp. That's right. Okay.
But I think there's a happy medium, um, and I think one of the appealing things that we'll talk a little bit about with Barry Schwartz maybe in the next hour is the simplicity of something like ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is flawed, but there's a kind of simplicity there that I think is very appealing. Question, answer, list, whatever it is. And these user needs are very situational. But I think.
And just a note on ChatGPT, it is largely one of the major funders and primary beneficiaries of the research is Microsoft.
That's right.
It's not independent of Google in that sense. I mean, it's competitive to Google in a search sense, clearly, and clearly Microsoft sees the same thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's less of a direct competitor to Google from a user perspective, at least right now.
Right now, I mean, I do think that there's plenty of utility for search features inside of that over time. So
yeah,
I don't think the answers are high enough quality where I would use it as my default search engine.
Exactly. You couldn't use it as a search engine today. As we've discussed, they don't do anything at all local. They don't do anything. They don't, no superlatives at all. You can't say best, nothing opinion oriented. And over time, there is utility there for consumers. I think the most interesting aspect of this, and we'll talk about it later on in another podcast, is the way that people will be using it to generate content that will then show up on Google in index pages. And I think that that's the most interesting challenge, arguably, that Google faces from ChatGPT. So on that note, we will end. I don't know if this is probably not the last.
Penultimate episode?
Yes, the penultimate episode of the year. We're going to be doing an interview with Barry Schwartz, and that will probably be our next week's final episode of 2022. It would have been great to do a year in review podcast. Maybe we'll still do that.
We can just throw the transcripts into GPT, and it'll give us the year in review. So
that's right. We'll just take all of our these URLs and say. Summary of, we could just take Barry Schwartz's posts and say, right. Give us a bulleted list of all the Google algorithm updates. Okay, all right, everybody have a great holiday. Whatever you celebrate, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, winter solstice. Festivus, yes. Of course, can't leave out
the
Festivus.
Aluminum pole out.
Yes. Enjoy some time off, hopefully, relax. Don't think too much about work or technology. Be with friends and family, and we will see you either next time or next year.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.